Hey everyone, and welcome back to Gotcha Interact. In today's video, we're going to be taking a look at the second half of version 3.2 for Honkai Star Rail, and the first character we're going to be looking at is Anaxa, the new character, as well as a rerun in Dr. Ratio. So let's go through both of these banners and see if whether or not these characters on this banner are for you. Now, onto the video.
So the first person we do want to talk about is going to be Anaxa, a brand new character that's going to be showing his face in the game. Now, looking here, we have the Wind Erudition with him as a character. And it's kind of interesting because we haven't had a Wind character in a little while, I believe since Fei Xiao, and, if I'm correct, Riff there. So it's been a little bit, and at least until we've seen a pretty solid Wind unit for some time. Now, I know somebody new is coming in the future as well, but it's nice to see at least another character like this. But let's go ahead and talk about his kit a little bit. Basically, with his skill, he's going to do some wind damage equal to one specific enemy, and then it's going to do 4 additional instances as well on top of that. And then each instance of damage that basically he does to one random enemy, it's then going to prioritize bouncing to an enemy target that has not been hit by the skill. So that's the whole idea with his erudition here, is that he's hitting one enemy and it's bouncing around to a bunch of different enemies as well, up to 4 times. Now, looking at his ultimate, it will inflict the sublimation state on all enemies and then deal wind damage equal to 160% of Anaxa's attack to all enemies. While in this sublimation state, the targets will be simultaneously inflicted with physical, fire, ice, lightning, wind, quantum, and imaginary weaknesses, lasting until the start of the target's turn. If the targets do not have control resistance, they are unable to take action while they're in this state. So obviously, any of the bosses will not have to worry about the control resistance, obviously, because they'll be over it. But those smaller enemies will not be able to take action during this time. But that does mean even for your big bosses, you can practically take anybody and everyone with Anaxa here to make sure you're throwing a weakness on the enemy for them. Now, he does have some extra things in his talents that help him also do extremely well. Each time that Anaxa lands a hit on an enemy target, you'll inflict one weakness of a random type that has not already been put on the enemy that you've already hit. And then while Anaxa is on the field, he will inflict the qualitative disclosure state on enemy targets that have at least 5 different types of weaknesses, so hitting them with obviously his skill to bounce around and hit as many enemies as possible, as well as using his ultimate, is going to make sure that enemy is going to have at least 5 of them, and then Anaxa will deal 30% increased damage to those enemies as well. So there's definitely some interesting things that come around him, doing a lot of damage, also paired with a lot of weakness putting on these enemies. Even in his bonus abilities, he has some abilities to ignore some of the defense of enemies depending on how many weaknesses that are on them. Even though he is in an erudition unit, he has the ability to kind of have this weakness break or this weakness kind of help for other characters. But really, at the end of the day, it's really a pretty selfish kit to help himself with the other parts of his kit.
Next, quickly talking about Dr. Ratio, a very familiar character, as a lot of us probably already have him from when he was giving out for free. But in case you are a newer player and maybe you want to pull for this character, maybe you're interested, you like this character, then here you go. Let's quickly go through his kit. So basic attack, nothing crazy, just deals some imaginary damage based on its attack. But looking at his skill, he's going to deal some more imaginary damage based on his attack to a single target enemy, which makes sense because he's a hunt character. And then looking at his ultimate, he's going to deal even more imaginary damage to, once again, another single target enemy. And he's going to apply what's called Wise Man's Folly. Now, when any of the teammates in your team attack this target afflicted with Wise Man's Folly after using his ultimate on this enemy, then Dr. Ratio will launch one instance of his talent's follow-up attack against this target. And I'll get to that talent here in a second. Also, Wise Man's Folly can be triggered for up to 2 times and only affects the most recent target of Dr. Ratio's ultimate. Another way you can see this in game is looking right next to his ultimate symbol. You'll see 2 little indicator dots. Do also note that the trigger for this will reset after Dr. Ratio's ultimate is used. Now looking at that talent where his follow-up attack comes into play, when you use Dr. Ratio's skill, he has a 40% fixed chance of launching a follow-up attack against his target for 1 time, dealing imaginary damage equal to 270% of his attack. Now for each debuff the target enemy has, that fixed 40% chance of launching that follow-up attack increases by an additional 20%. So you can also see this in-game. You'll see a 40%, 60%, 80%, 100% chance when you go into preparation to use your skill. You'll notice that above enemies. And each debuff, like I just stated there in his talent, is what is increasing that chance for him to do that. If the target enemy is defeated before the follow-up attack triggers, the follow-up attack will be directed at any single random enemy instead.
Now that we're going to be jumping over into our summary section, which is really looking at some questions that you might need to know before you actually think about pulling on this banner. So the first question we always ask is, do you actually need either character on your account? How valuable really is each unit? Now, as much as I think that Anaxa is a really solid character, and even we'll talk about Lightcones in a second at the end of the question section, that it's pretty easy to get away with some other things and he's pretty free to play friendly, I do not think that Anaxa is extremely necessary right now. He is focusing himself kind of as a damage dealer a little bit more and kind of helps himself. Now, while he does have the ability to be pretty good with erudition, and the more enemies, the better almost, because you can hit more enemies at once, therefore allowing more damage, which is how erudition characters work. But he also has this weakness break thing where he can, add more weaknesses to an enemy, which could help other characters. But once again, I think at the end of the day, you're really focusing on making sure that Anaxa is doing the most damage because he is a very good damage dealer. So at the end of the day, if you already have wind units that are damage dealers, characters like Fei Xiao, or you already have a really solid DOT team with somebody like Black Swan, it's not to say that you don't have to or it's bad to do this, or if you have Blade even and Blade's going to be looking to get a buff in this somewhat near future, it's not to say that you can't still use those units. Or that, Anaxa is practically useless and you can't pull him. I just mean to say that usually it might be just better to probably skip him if you're kind of in that instance and scenario. Now, at this point, if you have no clue what you really want to pull and you kind of see a wind unit and, you kind of do want some extra wind in your account, then he's actually a really, really solid pickup. So at the end of the day, it's not necessarily a character that has a lot of you have to pull or he's the worst character ever, don't pull. He's kind of really in that middle ground where he's a really solid unit if you're going after him, and if you don't go after him, you're not really hurting yourself at all. The thing with Dr. Ratio is that we already have him, as Rift you said, we already have him as a character that was already in the game that was given for free. So overall, how I feel personally about Dr. Ratio is getting Constellate or Eidolons in this instance. I really don't feel like it's specifically necessary to really go after them. And if you weren't here during the time of getting the free Ratio, I still don't feel like you're missing out on much. Now, that being said, if you are really somebody who maybe struggles in pure fiction or something that maybe, same thing with Anaxa, if you are, struggling in that maybe hitting multiple enemies or maybe consistency of attacks, these two characters might be somebody that you actually want to focus on. So if you are having issues with pure fiction, Anax is a really solid option, and even technically Ratio as well, because of the amount of follow-up attacks that he can do, and still because him being a hunt character, the amount of damage that he really can do as well. So there's definitely some pretty solid options to use with him as characters, but obviously with Ratio already being a free character given, most of the time you're probably not going to be grabbing Eidolons for him unless you just really like Ratio. I don't know, Rift, what do you specifically think about these two characters?
Yeah, I think everything you said with Anaxa makes perfect sense. For me, specifically with Dr. Ratio, if you're looking at value for your account, honestly, it just being straight to the point, it's don't pull Dr. Ratio. And if you really want a character of that kind of play style, hunt and follow up, just wait until Fei Xiao gets another rerun because she's simply more powerful. And honestly, Dr. Ratio is kind of the substitute Fei Xiao if you don't have Fei Xiao already. And he's kind of like what you would just use as a placeholder until you have that. So if you don't have him, you're better off just not pulling him at all and just waiting till a character like Fei Xiao because she's going to do what he does, but better. That's just my personal take for that there. And then with, like you said, with Anaxa, if you already have some win stuff, yeah, I would agree that you could skip and maybe wait until something else. We're going to be getting these other new characters. We have Hyacin to think about, and if you did just pull Castris, Hyacin's going to be a really good pull for you. While on another topic, when we get to that video, you don't technically have to have Hyacin for that because of things like Gallagher's existence. Linksha works fine as well, just as long as you have a healer. But Hyacin will be the best in slot for that. So if you did pull Castris, waiting for someone like Hyacin might be more favorable for you, depending on what your account looks like. Especially, once again, like Vixen said, if you have other wind characters and you're kind of okay in that department and you don't feel like this is a character you need. Now, kind of on a similar way of thinking, if you have an other character like the Herda, Jade, these other erudition characters where, yeah, they're a different element, but the idea is that it's AoE, then you've kind of got that AoE department, set, and you don't really need a new erudition or kind of AoE type of character for your account. If you're needing a more single target character, then maybe that's what you should just focus on and wait till we get these other new characters, maybe even a destruction character. If you didn't pick up Mighty and you still need something like that, Dr. Ratio is your hunt character here, but once again, like I was saying earlier, just really not worth it. He's not gonna, if you're struggling on APOC right now, Dr. Ratio is not the answer. And now I understand, and I don't want to offend the Ratio people that use him and can clear APOC. It's not to say APOC can't be cleared with Dr. Ratio. There are ways to do that, but for that's like with high ceiling investment and stuff like that, and so that's things you do have to keep in mind, which we'll actually get onto later when we do talk about things like light cones. So honestly, overall, most of the Dr. Ratio pulling factor for most people is because he was free. You're thinking about getting the E1 or E2, which after looking at them is really not that much value. Ultimately, the E1's just giving you a few extra stacks of his summation, which is just giving him crit rate and crit damage. Ultimately, it's not going to be a game changer, right? And E2 is a little bit more increase as well. But once again, just because Dr. Ratio has kind of a low ceiling, in my opinion, just isn't worth it. Save the pulls for these newer characters that are going to be a lot more powerful. Not to mention, we might get some more global passives, which, yes, I know is kind of a hot topic when we had Casterus, but that, inevitably is just something we have to think about now. So if we get new characters that have more global passives, they're just going to be obviously more powerful. And so Dr. Ratios could be potentially just a waste to look into.
The next question we have is what kinds of teams are you trying to build? Now, I know we already kind of basically talked about it, so I guess we'll just go over it pretty quickly. The basic sense is erudition when you're trying to go with Anaxa. Probably the more different types of elements, the better. Honestly, it really doesn't matter the elements you almost have. Obviously, just buffing Anaxa is probably your best bet. That's all you really care about. Bring a sustain, bring another character of the maybe same element, and maybe a character for just defense shred. So Silver Wolf, Silver Wolf also adds other weaknesses. So even if an actor doesn't have his ultimate ready, technically Silver Wolf can add weaknesses as well, a random type of someone in the party. So maybe that could be helpful, depending if you don't have the ultimate ready. Yeah, once again, I know that his skill and with the talent or whatever adds weaknesses as well, but I think that's still the idea is getting those extra weaknesses accounted for so Naxa can do more damage. So technically Silver
Right.
Wolf wouldn't be terrible. There's some units that could definitely be more helpful. Defense shredders, like a Pela or something like that, a little bit more free to play friendly. But I think at the end of the day, that's just kind of what you're going for. The more enemies or more different types of elements, maybe the better, almost to an extent, just because you can cover more of those weaknesses. But at the same time, if you're running in with him, you already know that he's going to be adding new weaknesses all the time, and if you once again combine that with someone like Silverwolf, you're not really having to worry about the amount of weaknesses that you have on them to really worry about elements and breaking something quickly.
Yeah, I think he'd be pretty fun with a character like the Herda as an alternative to a character like Jade. Maybe you don't have Jade and you pulled the Herda at the beginning of 3.0, but you didn't pull Jade and you didn't even get her on her rerun. Then I think the Herda and Anaxa would be a pretty fun combo. The Herda is just really, really powerful, one of the top DPSs in the game right now. This character looks very promising with applying weaknesses, so if he applies Ice weakness, then hey, the Herda is going to be breaking that weakness. So it'll be a very, very powerful combination. And, he's in his skill, he's hitting multiple opponents. The Herda is going to like that. In general, AoE team's going to like that. And I know I just mentioned Jade, and on the contrary, you could say, like, flip the coin here. You don't have the Herda, but you have Jade. I think Jade and Axo would be a pretty fun thing to do. I'll kind of, I don't know as of right now. Maybe someone in the comments can fix this, but I don't know if using Anaxa over 4-star Herda with Jade is an upgrade or not. 4-star Herda just has so much synergy with Jade. 4-star Herda does less damage, yes, but the amount of synergy that she has with Jade is why I question if he would actually be better. I think he would just because 5-star, the kit looks amazing. He's going to deal more damage. And naturally, Jade likes what he's doing here by hitting multiple enemies. So that is definitely going to be a good team if that's something you want to do for him. And hey, having Quantum and Wind damage in your team could be an interesting lineup for certain things in the game. Maybe even new enemies we have further down the line.
Yeah, there's just a lot of interesting things, and obviously with Hunt, I mean with Ratio, we've already basically talked about that. It's your Fei Shao, kind of substitute.
Basically, yeah.
Normal, Hunt stuff, just buffers, sustain. It's pretty simple with those types of characters. Now, the last thing we have is the light cones. Now, I'm going to quickly go over what the Anaxa light cone does. With this light cone, it's called Life Should Be Cast to Flames. At S1, it states that when the wearer's turn starts, you will regenerate 10 energy. If the enemy target has a weakness implanted by the wearer, it increases the wearer's damage by 60%. And when an enemy target gets attacked by the wearer decreases the target's defense by 12%, lasting for 2 turns. The same types of effects cannot stack, so you can't have multiple characters with this, having all that defense shred, basically. So I think the thing here to keep in mind is that with Anaxa's Light Cone, it is good, don't get me wrong, and it's obviously going to be his best in slot. I just don't feel like it's necessary. Really, with the most recent Lycone, we had the Great Cosmic Enterprise, the ability on that was an event Lycone that we have. The ability at S5, because it's an event Lycone, it's pretty easy to get to S5, states that it increases the wearer's attack by 16%, and for every one different type of weakness that's on an enemy, increases the damage dealt by the wearer by 8%. Up to a max of 7 weakness types can be taken into effect for this effect. So you're still getting 56% damage increase with a 16% attack buff, which is just always happening. So I honestly, with the ultimate always happening, I think it's fine. And a lot of people might say, well, the energy really help is a big thing with his light cone. And while that can be true, I think that there's just so many other options like, Quid Pro Quo, other characters really helping with that, like Quo Quo or something like that, or even just helping yourself with an ER rope, or even just taking out enemies. Once again, if you're in pure fiction, you're taking out enemies a lot. And at that
Right.
point, you're going to be giving yourself energy back faster, which is pretty easy to do with him. I just think that it's just better and easier to really worry about, energy, not worry about energy, and just go for the
Hmm.
damage here. Same thing could be even said for something like Himiko's Light Cone. It states that for every enemy on the field, increases the wearer's attack by 9% up to 5 stacks. And when an enemy is afflicted with weakness break, the damage dealt increases by 30% for 1 turn. Now, I know that like second half is a little bit weird because you kind of have to wait for them to be weakness broken. But once again, with all the elements on there, your team should be helping you out at the same time as the more enemies on the field. Once again, erudition kind of filling. That it's not necessarily a terrible light cone either as a backup specifically for that. So at the end of the day, yeah, I don't feel like there's a necessary need, and even something like Herta's light cone could even be useful for him as well. So I feel like there's too many other options to use besides his light cone, and why it's not necessary. But Riff, what do you think about Ratio's light cone?
Well, looking at Dr. Ratio's light cone, assuming just one copy of the weapon at S1, it's going to increase the wearer's crit damage by 20%, and then for every debuff on the enemy target, the wearer's crit damage dealt against this target additionally increases by 8%, stacking up to 3 times for a max of 24%. When using ultimate to attack the enemy target, the wearer receives the disputation effect, which is going to increase damage dealt by 36% and enable their follow-up attacks to ignore 24% of the target's defense. And this effect can last for 2 turns. So near the end there, it's definitely more tailored to Dr. Ratio, as the only other hunt character I can think of, or characters, are going to be Fei Xiao and Topaz, which if you have those characters, you should probably just have their light cones for them, obviously. So with Dr. Ratio here, I understand, like, hey, he was given for free and the light cone wasn't, so you were waiting for the rerun so you can get the light cone for him if you are like me and actually like to kind of match all of your characters and light cones together, kind of out of collecting kind of a sake. So I get that. But on a more objective level, you definitely still can get away with the free light cone cruising in the Stellar Sea, which you can get to S5 since that is obtainable through the Herta shop, I believe. So that light cone does a really, really good job, especially if you're not using it on another hunt character. Now, if you're using another hunt character, that's understandable. Maybe you're using it on your March 7th in the hunt version of her. So that's understandable. At the same time, though, this light cone, I think you can definitely get away with. I personally use Yanqing's light cone since I eventually got that somewhere, and I never use my Yanqing because, well, he's bad. So I put Yanqing's light cone on my Dr. Ratio, and I actually really like it because it's giving him, I believe, a lot of crit rate. Actually, no, it's giving him a lot of crit damage. I think it's like 30% crit damage, something like that. Y'all can correct me in the comments if I'm wrong with that. My point is, I like that light cone. It gets the job done. It's pretty good for him. Good stat stick. So if you have those light cones, especially cruising the Stellar Sea once again, definitely get away with that. In my personal opinion, I think it's better to save your Stellar Jade, just because once again, Dr. Ratio is not really showing up in the ultimate kind of end game. So why even give him this crazy amount of vertical investment when you could just give kind of mid vertical investment to another character that's just going to get the job done a lot better with less investment because they're just simply more powerful.
Well, we hope that this video could help you decide on whether or not these characters and or their light cones are coming up on the next banner specifically are for you. Let us know as well if you guys have any other suggestions, maybe ideas about the different characters, maybe how you feel, maybe if you guys are pulling, let us know down in the comments. If you guys do like our content, go ahead and check out our Discord as well. We're in there pretty often, so go ahead and jump in there and see. We usually try to jump around and play together with bunch of really stupid games. I've been playing a lot of Repo recently. But besides that, though, if you guys want to let us know anything else in the comments, go ahead and let us know down below what you guys are doing with this current banner or this upcoming banner tomorrow. Let us know. And thank you guys once again, though, for watching the video. And we'll see you guys in the next one.